We got to transform this culture by being salt and light, speaking truth and love, and that does not mean loving is not lying. So we tell the truth, and we don't sacrifice principle, but hear me. Show how much you care, and people will care about how much you know. Ben Johnson, welcome. How are you, my friend?
Good to be with you again. Thanks so much, Craig. A little bit
Absolutely.
hoarse. I kind of overdid it singing on Easter, but hopefully everyone had all of your listeners had an enjoyable Easter as well.
Well, God bless you. Thank you. I've missed you, brother. I got to tell you, I know we've been exchanging emails and texts. I've missed you, and I'm glad you're back. And your voice sounds better than ever. Quite frankly, a horse Ben Johnson is much better than a Crane Durham any day of the week. I just your delivery. Here it is, man. I want to play for you a clip from Margaret Sanger. She's not using that name, but this is one that you wrote about, and I'm posting currently on Facebook. Here it is. Roll it.
Mrs. Margaret Slee, president of America's Planned Parenthood Federation, maintains that European women should stop having babies for the next 10 years.
Don't you think such a theory, such a radical theory, is antisocial?
On the contrary, it seems to me that it is more practical and humane.
What about the women who want babies now and in 10 years will not be able to have babies? Rather impractical, don't you think?
Oh, John, you do ask hard questions. I should think that instead of being impractical, it is really very practical and intelligent and humane.
But Mrs. Slee, in this country, having babies is the only thing left which is both unrationed and untaxed. Do you think we really ought to stop?
Well, I suppose a subject like that is really so personal that it's entirely up to the parents to decide. But from my view, I believe that there should be no more babies.
Ben, that may come as a surprise for those who talk about women's rights and defending Planned Parenthood. Your thoughts?
Yes, that's the founder of Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger. In the clip, they kept referring to her as Margaret Slee because she was married. Her second marriage was to a man by the name of Slee. But her proposal was that anyone in the developing world should have 0 children for the next 10 years. There should be 0 population growth in the literal sense of the word, which would be to say there would be a population decrease because no women would be allowed to have children. And this man, it was a British clip from 1947 that you rolled. It was just a 1-minute clip, so they didn't explore it at any length. But she masterfully simply says this is very humane and intelligent on our part to keep women who want to have babies from having babies. Would be the most humane thing that we could possibly do. At the end of the clip, she said that she was responding, of course, at that point, 1947, Winston Churchill had just been defeated by Clement Attlee in 1945, the socialist-leaning labor leader. Winston Churchill said he was a modest man who had much to be modest about. And the interviewer, John, said that this was the only thing, having children was the only thing that was not untaxed or unregulated by the government. Should we really regulate this as well? At the end of the clip, she said, of course we are to leave that to every individual. That is nonsense. 13 years before that, she wrote an essay in American Weekly in 1934 called America Needs a Code for Babies. America needs a code for babies. And she called for, at that point, everyone would have to get a birth permit for every birth before the pregnancy would be allowed to occur. And it would be required before every time for every couple, so that some government planning agency would be able to determine whether or not this couple could have a child or not. Now, just stopping there, that is as draconian as it comes. Just think for a moment, with the IRS scandal that we've seen, the way that the Obama administration has used the federal machinery to harass its political opponents, can you imagine if they could deny birth to people? I mean, there would just be a blanket policy. No one in Mississippi could have another child. No evangelical Christian could have another child. No pro-lifer could ever have another child. And that would be the policy in place if Margaret Sanger's policy had been taken up. But that was her idea, and she validated this on the grounds of the New Deal. Surprisingly, or interestingly, I guess maybe not surprisingly to those who are grounded in American constitutional government. She wrote, "This is the great day of social planning. We've come to believe in planning the production and distribution of goods. The NRA strives through its regulation to increase income and employment, yet it does nothing about the distribution of babies." This shows us one of the things I would like for us to reflect on. This shows us how important it is to regulate, to tightly control how much government regulation is involved. We simply have to limit the size and scope and power of the federal regulatory leviathan. She embraces it in the economic realm. Under FDR, the NRA was vastly involved in every aspect, setting the amount of money you could press your pants for. There was a farmer who grew wheat on his own ground for his own consumption in Ohio. A man by the name of Wickham v. Filbert was the famous case, and he was prosecuted for growing wheat on his own property for his own consumption because it violated the AAA. It was necessary. It's necessary to make sure that we limit the government not only from regulating our lives, but from regulating our property, regulating business, from falling into this consumerist class warfare that Obama and his left-wing minions have constantly been stirring up. We simply have to defend our rights across the board, our right to property and what James Madison called both our property rights and our property in our rights. He wrote a wonderful essay in 1792 called Property. And he said, if the United States mean to deserve or obtain the full praise due to wise and just governments, they will equally respect the rights of property and the property in rights. So, and he specifically said this involves particular property of peculiar value in man's religious opinions and the profession and practice dictated by them. It's no surprise to me that you see someone like Margaret Sanger saying we should have no more children, basing that on government regulation. And now, with the advent of the Obama administration, this most radical left-wing organization, most radical left-wing administration, certainly since FDR and probably in U.S. history, that not only seeks to regulate every aspect of the economy, seeks to regulate 1/8 of the U.S. economy through taking over the healthcare system, but with the science czar John Holdren, is constantly promoting population control and population reduction methods and population control ideology. It seems to me that there is no distinction between those two things. There is this simply overarching desire for the government to regulate every aspect of our lives. And we have to be eternally vigilant about paring government back from every aspect of that.
Ben, isn't it imperative that first and foremost, in order to stop the statism, we've got to recognize and not run from, as some parties are trying to do, or some elements of the Republican Party, as I understand, are trying to do in Nevada specifically, talking about the culture, and that culture, first and foremost, identifying that our rights come from God and that we are created. Because without that, we do open a door for statism and daddy government. And as you've just talked about, government is a really bad daddy.
Well, it is. And I'm glad that you mentioned Nevada, which is trying to step away from issues like life and marriage. And many elements of the Republican Party nationwide would like to do the same thing. The fact of the matter is the founders understood this so well because they understood human nature, that the necessary prerequisite for limited government is personal virtue. It is absolutely imperative that we have a practicing form of American virtue. Without that, all government will become a Leviathan government. The government will simply take over every aspect because no individual will be able to care for himself. When people cease to care for themselves and their neighbors, everyone reaches out for some mechanism to take care of people where they have abdicated their own responsibility toward themselves, toward their family, toward their neighbor, and the government is what steps in. They often call out and hope that the government will act out of benevolence. You often find that it is acting out of a sense of control and social planning from those who are running the show. But
Yes.
It is absolutely imperative that we as Christians, and we as simply good Americans, stand up and defend not only our liberties, but also take the responsibility that comes with liberty.
Amen. And Ben, we're going to check in with you again, definitely on a weekly basis, back to our normal schedule. Thank you. Great to be with you. AFR Talk.